fire hardening. I'm going to spend very little time discussing the bows that I fire hardened. One is this little hickory gull wing, and I like it. You probably can't see this. I'm not going to adjust my camera, but if I set it on the workbench, hear that rocking? That means that the tips aren't touching the table. I've got a couple inches when this tip and the center of the handle is touching. A couple inches between this one and the table. So that's good. It'll get a little bit higher when it's sinew back. So you count on that. I don't like to have it dead even, all 3 points touching. But yeah, that worked out pretty nicely. And then hickory again. And then number 2, Steve's bow. The paddle bow. And it just has these little blank spots here because that's where the clamp was on the form that was bending it in the reflex. But when the tips are done, that'll disappear. I still have to do the razor back, which, clunk, it's kind of flat here. Well, it's going to have that bevel here. It's going to transition from like triangular with a distinct underneath the rawhide, sharp razor back right there. That's a geologic term. But anyway, there's a lot of potential misinformation around fire hardening. What does it do? It magically transforms wood into superwood. But my robot here, and keep in mind, when I'm asking questions, a lot of bow questions, to this AI thing on Google, a robot is not speaking. The robot is just mining. In this case, with this question I asked, I think it was like 169 different websites mining it. Just like a Google search. If you do a search, this is no different. So kind of changed my mind about robots here. But everything, because this robot kind of knows me now, I know that sounds diabolical, but you know, I don't mean it in real terms. It thinks that I'm talking about in relation to bows. You know, I could ask, why is the sky blue? Well, the sky is blue so you can see the colors in your bow better. You know, it knows me by now. I don't use it for ill. I simply asked my robot buddy this morning, what happens to the lignin and cellulose in wood that is fire hardened? Not even specific. It could be for construction projects, you know, to keep bugs out of your framing. But hello, John. I'm going to call this thing Hal. I'm going to change it to Hal. I've been calling it Bob, and it said that Bob is acceptable. Hello, John. That's a very specific question and a key one for understanding how fire hardening affects wood. Let's delve into the roles of lignin and cellulose when a bow belly, it was assuming, is fire hardened. Okay, and I learned something. I never even heard of this first one. Hemocellulose. Whoa! I just learned something. It's important to start out with hemocellulose. Even though you asked about lignin and cellulose, in wood, hemocellulose is the least thermally stable of the 3 major polymers. During fire hardening or any heat treatment, which, you know, I did use the heat gun to finish up the gull wing because it's tough. Hickory is stubborn. You steam bend it, and then you heat harden it, and it wants to take the bends out. It's got a memory. The hemocellulose is the least thermally stable of the 3 polymers during fire hardening or any heat treatment. Hemocellulose begins to degrade at relatively low temperature, starting around 180 centigrade and continuing to 350. The degradation of hemocellulose is significant because it is a major contributor to the wood's hygroscopicity. Hygroscopicity, its tendency to absorb moisture. It also releases the acidic acid and other compounds during degradation, which can further catalyze the depolymerization of cellulose, particularly the amorphous regions. I know this is heavy terms. I could go through and ask a robot to define each one. Cellulose structural changes increased crystallinity. Cellulose is the primary structural component of wood, forming long chains of glucose units, like sugar, when wood is fire hardened. Depolymerization. While cellulose is more thermally stable than hemo, cellulose. It undergoes depolymerization at higher temperatures, generally starting about 275 to 350 C and peaking around 320. This means the long cellulose chains break down in the shorter ones. And this is probably, I'm interpreting here, a good thing that you don't go too deep into the wood. You want to have that combination of the original structural integrity and the surface fire hardening. Paradoxically, heat treatment also leads to an increase in the crystallinity of cellulose. This happens as the less organized amorphous regions of cellulose rearrange into a more ordered crystalline structure. This increased crystallinity contributes to the wood's stiffness. Reduced hydroxyl groups. Heat treatment reduces the number of accessible hydroxyl groups within the cellulose. These hydroxyl groups are responsible for attracting and binding water. So look at that, especially with hickory, you're repelling water. Its reduction is a major factor in improved dimensional stability and moisture resistance. Reduced strength overall. And this is why, I'm thinking the surface layer, not going extremely deep, like slow baking and getting that heat treatment all the way through is a good thing. Reduced strength overall. Although crystallinity might increase, the depolymerization of cellulose and other changes typically lead to an overall reduction in the wood's strength, including bending strength, MOR, and stiffness, MOE, the modulus of elasticity. Lignin, consideration and cross-linking. Lignin is a complex polymer that binds the cellulose, it's the glue within the wood, together providing rigidity and resistance to compression. When the wood's belly is fire hardened, condensation and cross-linking. Lignin undergoes condensation and cross-linking reactions, forming more rigid network structure. This means that existing lignin fragments link together and potentially new bonds are formed between lignin and other degradation products. It's the glue. Increased hardness. Getting back to the surface and not going too deep. The densification of lignin and the formation of a more rigid structure can contribute to a slight increase in surface hardness. This word is going to trip me up. Oh, gosh. Gosh, dingy. What did I do here? My computer has a mind of its own. Condensation and cross-linking. Okay. Increased hardness. Demethoxylation. Whoa! Lignin can also undergo demethoxylation, the removal of methyl groups, which I don't know what that is. I'll ask the computer later on that. Contribution to char. Lignin is known to make significant contribution to overall char yield when... Okay, well, whatever. That's not bow related too much. In summary, let's put all these big words together. Gotta click this up. When a bow's belly is fire hardened, you're intentionally subjecting it to thermal degradation that affects all three major components of the wood. Hemocellulose degrades significantly, reducing the wood's hygroscopicity. Hygroscopicity. Oh boy, I can't even speak English. Cellulose depolymerizes, chains shorten, but the remaining cellulose can become more crystalline. Increasing stiffness, the number of accessible hydroxyl groups is reduced, contributing to moisture resistance. So, those are good. Lignin undergoes condensation and cross-linking, forming a more rigid network and contributing to the surface hardness and char formation. Okay, the net result is a wood surface that is harder, more stable dimensionally, and more resistant to moisture, but generally at the cost of some overall strength and toughness. That's why I don't want to go too deep with my fire hardening. This trade-off, because the surface is the vapor barrier, this trade-off is often considered acceptable for a bow's belly where primary requirement is resistance to compression, surface, because that's where most of the compression is happening, and a certain amount of stiffness to store energy efficiently. And the computer needs to learn that because of string following stuff, you know, in humid environments, that the water, the resistance to holding water and gaining moisture content is very important. And so that is the result of my computer. So I need to work on a few things. First of all, there's a few terms in there I'm not familiar with, so I'm going to ask the computer later what that is. I'm getting ready for my day job. The next one is I'm going to learn how to pronounce those darn words. In summation, for me, you know, very good comment. I was talking about fire hardening, and I showed I had the fire really hot, and it was like it happened really fast. In a fellow, you know, and again, there's going to be a lot of discussion around fire hardening. Was saying that that's a wrong way to do it because the way he does it, he controls the temperature, which is good. Controlling the temperature, A-OK in my book. He goes very deep into the bow. And considering the various factors where they talk about weakening the wood, you know, I believe, this is my interpretation of this, is I don't want to go too deep, so I will use a higher heat and do a surface layer, which probably goes, I don't know, maybe a millimeter in, which is big when you're considering, you know, this, maybe 2 millimeters. That's pretty deep, you know, considering the bow. It might not go into the neutral zone, but the reduction in strength and toughness is real. So I just want to do the surface where the majority of compression is taking place. And the vapor barrier, making it boiling off the various hemocelluloses and lignans and all those other things, you know, to make it resistant to moisture, especially in hickory. That is all. I kind of did it, and I befuddled you with my pronunciation. You know, peculiar is another word that I do not like to say. I say strange or odd. I can say those things. Peculiar needs to be stricken from the English language. There you go.